Hey everyone, I wanted to talk about a specific attack vector that I think is introduces greater vulnerability than just about any other with regard to having cryptocurrency attacked or hacked or etc. And that is if you are using Google for everything, including your email address, your password manager, and your two-factor authentication. So here's what that means. If this is especially a problem if you are using a password for your Google email account that you've used anywhere else. So let me tell you how a hacker would do this. So hackers are constantly finding data leaks, right? I mean, you know, every random company from Men's Warehouse to, you know, the major credit ratings agencies, they're constantly getting data leaks that are leaking, you know, email addresses and sometimes passwords. Well, the very first thing an attacker is going to do, anytime they can find a data leak that involves email addresses and passwords, is they're going to go try those same user, first they're going to go through and they're going to look at all the Gmail addresses, anybody who's got a Google email account, and they're going to try all of the different passwords that they can find that are associated with that email address to see if they can gain access to the Google account itself. Now, if you have two-factor authentication enabled on your Google account, meaning you have to get a text message texted to you, then you're probably good because they're not going to be able to compromise your Google account. Although, they just have to jump through a bunch of extra steps to try to compromise your cell phone. They do that with something called SIM swapping, which is they basically go to AT&T or Verizon or wherever and try to sweet talk them into porting the number to a new phone claiming to be you. And if they're successful in doing that, of course, the two-factor authentication codes that you get will come to them instead of to you, and that's a problem. But that's a lot more work. So let's assume that they are not going to go through that much work. Okay, so if they gain access to email addresses and passwords, then they're going to go through all the Gmail email addresses, and they're going to try the passwords on Gmail, hoping that you do not have two-factor authentication enabled on your Google account, which you should. Everything needs two-factor authentication, meaning in addition to a username and password, you are texted a code or you use an authenticator app to get a code. But anyway, so they're going to try. It doesn't matter what the compromise was. It doesn't matter if it's a loyalty account for Pokemon, trading cards. They're going to try that account. If it's a Gmail account, they're going to try that and hope that you use the same password for Pokemon Go as you did for your Google account. So rule number one is never, never, never reuse passwords. Use a password manager. There's a bunch of them. LastPass, 1Password. Google has one built in. Microsoft has one built in. Anyway, Apple has one built into, the core operating system. But use a password manager. You should never be using the same passwords across different sites, because that way, if one of those passwords is compromised on one site, they can use it to log into other sites. And the one that attackers really want to get a hold of is your Google account. They want your Google email address password. That is very important to them. And the reason for that is the hackers are hoping that you are using the Google password manager, which means if they can compromise your email address login, then that also gives them access to your password manager and all of the passwords you have stored in there, which are bank accounts, Coinbase, whatever else you got in there. And the other thing, too, is for two-factor authentication, a lot of these websites have two-factor authentication, and they recommend Google Authenticator. Well, by default, Google Authenticator backs up to the Google Cloud, which means if an attacker has access to your Google account, they have access to your Google passwords, and they have access to your Google Authenticator login backup, which, of course, means they have access to two-factor authentication, which basically gives them access to everything. So how do you mitigate this risk? One, make super sure that two-factor authentication is enabled for your Gmail account. If you are using a Gmail account or any email address associated with Google, which I think is basically just Gmail, make sure you have two-factor authentication enabled on that email address so that a hacker who gets a hold of your password for Google cannot get in just with your password. Second, don't ever reuse the same password for any websites, but especially your Google email login. You definitely need to make sure you're not using the same password for your Google login to Gmail that you're using for your other website logins. Otherwise, again, if one of those other passwords gets compromised, by definition, they'll be able to get access to your Google account. Third, it's more complicated, but you can also turn off the automatic backup in two-factor authentication in the Google Authenticator app. But the problem is then if you change phones and you forget to move it over, you're going to have a royal pain time trying to get logged back into all the different websites that require two-factor authentication. So a lot of people are reluctant to turn off the cloud backup on the Google Authenticator app because if they forget to port it over when they change phones, or if they lose their phone, then they're going to have to, a lot of work to get logged back into all those websites. It'll be worth it because it's more secure, but still, it's a lot of work. So what's the easiest thing you can do to mitigate all of this? Well, store the majority of your Bitcoin. Well, the easy things are make sure your Gmail account password is different than any password you're using anywhere else. And second, make sure that two-factor authentication is enabled on your Gmail account. Those are the two absolute low-hanging fruit, easy to do, no reason not to things. Other than that, it gets more complicated because if you turn off cloud backup on Google Authenticator, again, then you don't have a good backup of it unless it's replicated to a loved one's phone or something like that. But even if you do that, then if you add new two-factor authentication in the future, it's not backed up by default unless you go manually back it up to the phone of a loved one or something like that. But the easy solution here is buy the BitKey device. So this video is not about BitKey, but BitKey does solve all of these problems. The beautiful, incredible, secure architecture of BitKey keeps any of those bad things from happening. And none of the attack vectors that can be used for the other avenues, none of them work with BitKey. BitKey is just way more secure. So if you get a BitKey, then if your account does get compromised somehow, it doesn't matter that much because only, a small percentage of your total Bitcoin is subject to that compromise. So BitKey is the magic solution to all of this. I've talked before about Coinbase Vault, which is really good, but if somebody compromises your Gmail account, the Coinbase Vault doesn't do you very much good because if they have control of your email address, then they are just going to delete the emails from Coinbase Vault that tell you that the vault's being unlocked. So if they have access to your Coinbase account or your Gmail account, then they can run that exploit. So let me walk through how the hackers exactly would run that exploit, just so you can see. All right. So first of all, they're going to go on the dark web and they're going to look for email addresses and passwords. They're going to down select that to only Gmail accounts. They're going to take all of the Gmail accounts they have access to and all the passwords that were leaked that are associated with those Gmail accounts for all sorts of different random websites. And they're going to try all of those to see if they can get them to work as your Google password. They are hoping that you have the same password set for your Gmail account as you do for some other random website that got hacked. And then they're hoping you don't have two-factor authentication turned on for your Gmail account. So let's assume that they are successful, that some random hack on Men's Warehouse ends up being the same, the same password as your Gmail account, and that you don't have two-factor authentication set up on Gmail. If that's the case, then the username and password of your Gmail account and the password from Men's Warehouse, which is the same one that you used, when you set up Gmail, is going to get them into your Google account. The first thing they're going to do when they log into your Google account is go to your Google passwords to see what passwords they have access to. Any sort of financial, especially cryptocurrency, they're going to immediately turn around and use your password manager to try to log into those accounts. As soon as they get hit with two-factor authentication, they are not going to have access automatically to your phone. I don't know how this works on Android phones. Certainly on an iPhone, they would not have access to your two-factor or to codes that are sent to your phone. I don't know how that works on Android, but on iPhone they would not. But they would look for something where the login, they can use your password manager to log into your Coinbase account, hoping that you are using Google Authenticator as your two-factor authentication, which of course, if they've compromised your Google account, then they not only have access to your Google passwords, but they also have access to the backup of your Google Authenticator, which would then give them access to everything. So that is what a hacker will do. They will try to, they are hoping you're reusing a password on your Gmail account. They will use that to compromise your Gmail account if you don't have two-factor authentication enabled. And then they will use your password manager and your two-factor authentication from Google Authenticator. If that's backed up to your Google account, they will use all of that to compromise your accounts and try to drain your accounts. So the magic answer to all of that is BitKey, bitkey.world, WORLD. BitKey is the magic solution to all of that. If you're not ready to go down that road yet, the second best solution is just making sure your Google account is super locked down. Make sure that the password you're using to log into your Google Gmail account is different than anything you use anywhere else. Make sure that you've never used that password before for anything else. And make sure two-factor authentication is turned on for your Google account so that there's no way they can just get in with just a password. So that's the quick primer on this. The real solution is BitKey, but you can at least make yourself a lot more secure, making sure that two-factor authentication is turned on and that the password you use to access your Gmail account is not used anywhere else. Otherwise, if it's compromised somewhere else, it will automatically be immediately used to try to gain access to your Google account. But again, the right solution for the long term is BitKey because it's amazing and it's super easy to use and people are intimidated by new things, and I totally get that. But if you're willing to, spend $99, BitKey is by far the most elegant, secure way of securing your Bitcoin in a way that hackers and scammers will never gain access to it. And it's just super slick, super straightforward, super elegant. It's a brilliantly designed device, and it works really amazingly well. So good luck on your journey. Happy to answer any questions as always. Thanks.